Grandma's cooking wasn't sacred. It was survival disguised as love, and we've been lying to ourselves about it ever since. Some of those Depression-era recipes were born from necessity, not culinary genius. And it's time we stopped pretending that poverty food tastes good just because it came from Grandma's kitchen. Today we're ranking 12 dishes that defined American home cooking. From the overrated disasters we've romanticized into classics, to the genuine champions that earned their place on every dinner table in America. Subscribe and let's dig into the truth about Grandma's greatest hits and biggest mistakes. First up, Grandma's misses. Cabbage cost 3 cents per head during the Depression, making it the ultimate poverty vegetable that appeared on tables with depressing regularity. Grandma would hack a head of cabbage into wedges, dump them in a pot of boiling water, and cook them until the entire house smelled like a swamp burped in your kitchen, sometimes adding salt pork or bacon if the budget allowed, but usually just boiling it into sulfurous submission. The technique involved bringing a pot of water to boil, adding cabbage wedges, and cooking them until they turned from pale green to gray-green, and released that distinctive smell that warned neighbors something terrible was happening. Sometimes onions joined the pot, sometimes a ham hock if you were lucky, but mostly it was just cabbage boiling until tender became mushy. This became a staple because cabbage was cheap, filling, and technically nutritious, solving the problem of feeding large families on almost nothing. The fact that it turned living rooms into sulfur clouds and tasted like wet sadness was secondary to the reality that it cost almost nothing and kept everyone's stomach full. The flavor is what happens when you take a bland vegetable and make it worse through aggressive boiling. Any subtle sweetness gets cooked out, leaving behind limp gray wedges that taste like the Depression feels. The texture ranges from slippery to mushy, with no textural interest to distract from the fact that you're eating boiled poverty. Grandma served this because cabbage was 3 cents and her budget was 17 cents for the week. A legitimate excuse that created illegitimate cuisine that should have stayed in the 1930s where it belonged. General Mills dropped Hamburger Helper on American kitchens in 1971, and it represented the exact moment home cooking waved the white flag. This boxed, complete dinner promised to transform ground beef into a family meal through the magic of MSG, powdered cheese, and the kind of optimism that only corporate marketing can deliver. You brown a pound of ground beef, dump in the pasta and seasoning packet, add water, and spend 15 minutes watching it bubble while pretending this counts as cooking. The result is ground beef stretched with pasta and chemicals that create the illusion of flavor while delivering texture that's simultaneously mushy and gritty. The women's liberation movement created working mothers who needed meals with minimal effort and maximum speed, and Hamburger Helper solved the what's for dinner problem by eliminating actual cooking entirely. It fed families quickly and cheaply, which mattered more than the fact that it tasted like processed disappointment. The sauce separates during cooking into pools of orange grease that no amount of stirring can incorporate, while the artificial flavoring creates an aftertaste that lingers for hours. 60% of each package is salt and chemical enhancers designed to make you forget you're eating food product instead of food. Hamburger Helper taught an entire generation that convenience mattered more than taste, a lesson that Grandma reluctantly learned when her daughter needed to work full-time and still get dinner on the table. The 1950s frozen food revolution convinced American cooks that combining 3 processed ingredients qualified as dinner, and Tater tot casserole became the poster child for this culinary surrender. Ground beef gets browned, mixed with a can of cream of mushroom soup, dumped in a casserole dish, then topped with frozen tater tots before baking until everything achieves uniform mediocrity. This became a weeknight staple because it required 0 cooking skills while feeding large families on tight budgets. The promise was protein, starch, and vegetables, if you count the mushroom particles in the soup, all in one dish, appealing to busy mothers seeking maximum nutrition with minimum effort or flavor. But here's what actually happens. Tater tots become soggy when baked in casserole format, losing the only thing that makes them worth eating, that crispy exterior. The canned soup provides no real flavor beyond sodium and artificial thickening, creating a gluey binding agent that holds everything together while contributing nothing positive. The final result tastes like a school cafeteria accident, smells like the freezer section, and falls apart when served into a mess that's as unappetizing to look at as it is to eat. One-dimensional flavors and textures ranging from mushy to disappointingly soft prove that 3 mediocre ingredients don't create one good dish. Grandma served this on Wednesdays so she could watch her stories, and honestly, we can't blame her. But we also don't have to pretend it was delicious. Hormel created Spam in 1937 as shelf-stable protein that could survive anything short of nuclear apocalypse, and it became essential during World War II when fresh meat disappeared and soldiers needed portable nutrition for tropical climates. Grandma would slice this gelatinous rectangle of processed pork product into thick slabs and fry them until the outside got crispy enough to disguise what lurked beneath. The technique was simple: open the can, slide out the meat-shaped loaf, slice it, and fry it in a hot pan until a crust formed. Sometimes she'd glaze it with brown sugar and mustard, which helped but couldn't completely hide the fact that you were eating compressed pork byproduct rather than anything resembling an actual cut of meat. A whole generation learned to appreciate fried Spam because it was available when nothing else was, creating nostalgia rooted in necessity rather than preference. The crispy exterior masked the salty, slimy interior that revealed Spam's true processed nature. Texture that tastes like someone dissolved hot dogs in preservatives and shaped the result into a loaf. The ingredient list reads like a chemistry experiment rather than food. And the nostalgic rehabilitation of Spam represents our tendency to romanticize wartime hardship. People ate it because nothing else was available, not because it was delicious. And retro-cool marketing can't disguise that reality. It's a delicacy in Hawaii for some reason, but in literally every other situation. It's a reminder that desperation creates strange dietary choices that shouldn't be celebrated. The Depression turned peanut butter and jelly into an American institution out of pure economic necessity. 2 slices of white bread, one side spread with peanut butter, the other with jelly, smooshed together into a sandwich that required significant liquid to choke down. This was survival food pretending to be a complete meal. Peanut butter provided cheap protein and fat, jelly provided preserved sweetness and quick energy, and bread provided carbohydrates, creating a nutritionally complete meal from 3 shelf-stable ingredients that wouldn't spoil before payday. Kids could make it themselves starting around age 5, which helped when mom was working and everyone needed to fend for themselves. This became an institution because it solved multiple problems simultaneously. It was cheap, required 0 cooking, and provided legitimate nutrition when meat and fresh fruit weren't affordable. The fact that it tasted like edible paste that stuck to the roof of your mouth was secondary to keeping everyone fed. But let's be honest about the flavor. Sweet jelly competing with salty peanut butter while both fight for dominance over bland bread creates a fundamentally weird combination. The texture is gluey, the experience requires milk to swallow properly, and it only tastes good when you're 8 years old, or actually hungry. Adult palates recognize this as Depression-era survival food that we've convinced ourselves is classic comfort food, a distinction worth making when you're tempted to serve it to your own kids. Post-World War II convenience culture promised to liberate housewives from lengthy meal preparation, and tuna casserole became the poster child for this modern cooking revolution. Canned tuna gets mixed with cooked egg noodles, canned cream of mushroom soup, and frozen peas, then topped with crushed potato chips and baked until the house smells like wet dog wrapped in regret. The appeal was obvious. It was fast, cheap, and used shelf-stable ingredients that didn't require frequent shopping trips. The combination of protein, starch, and vegetables, technically, in one dish checked all the nutritional boxes while requiring minimal effort or skill. But the execution is spectacularly flawed in every way that matters. Canned tuna becomes stringy when baked, canned soup provides no real flavor beyond sodium and artificial mushroom essence, and pasta becomes mushy when combined with liquid and baked. The texture is uniformly disappointing with no contrasting elements to create interest. The result is one-dimensional flavor dominated by metallic canned ingredients and artificial mushroom flavoring that characterizes processed soup. It smells wrong, tastes worse, and represents the moment American home cooking decided that opening cans constituted meal preparation. Grandma made this because it was Tuesday and she was tired. And honestly, that's fair. But it doesn't mean we have to pretend it was delicious or worth preserving for future generations. The 1930s turned ground beef into a luxury item, so working-class kitchens started stretching it with breadcrumbs and drowning everything in ketchup-based sauce. Sloppy Joes emerged from this desperation. Brown the beef, add breadcrumb filler, mix in ketchup, brown sugar, vinegar, and whatever spices Grandma had available, then slop the mealy mixture onto hamburger buns that immediately disintegrated under the assault.
Made 'em extra sloppy for you.
This became popular because small amounts of meat could feed large families while providing the illusion of substance. The sweet ketchup sauce appealed to children, while the ground beef satisfied adults seeking protein during economically challenging times when actual hamburgers were too expensive. The sweet ketchup sauce was meant to disguise the breadcrumb filler, but instead created a messy experience that drips everywhere, while delivering flavors that taste like hamburger meat that lost its will to live. The texture is uniformly mealy, not crispy, not juicy, just sad and wet, with filler that absorbs flavor rather than contributing any. The sandwich falls apart during eating, creating a messy disaster that requires significant napkins and low expectations. The breadcrumb filler takes up space without adding anything positive, and the one-dimensional sauce is dominated by ketchup sweetness with hints of spices that gave up halfway through. Sloppy Joes prove that stretching ingredients doesn't always create better meals. Sometimes it just creates more disappointment per serving, turning decent ground beef into a reminder that desperation rarely produces good cuisine. Some of Grandma's recipes actually earned their place in American cuisine through quality rather than just keeping everyone alive. Subscribe and grab your fork for Grandma's finest recipes. Europeans figured out centuries ago that cheap, tough cuts of beef could become tender and delicious through the alchemy of time and proper technique, and Grandma inherited this wisdom. Beef stew transforms stringy chuck roast into fork-tender protein swimming in rich, gelatinous broth with potatoes, carrots, and onions that absorb all those developed flavors. The technique matters here. Brown the beef chunks, hard to develop the Maillard reaction, then add vegetables, broth, tomato paste, and seasonings before letting everything simmer for hours. The long cooking breaks down connective tissue into richness that thickens the broth naturally while transforming tough meat into something special. This became a staple because it worked. Real vegetables provided substance while absorbing beef flavors. The result fed 6 people for days. It cost under $15 to make, and it actually tasted better when reheated. Time and patience turned humble ingredients into satisfying meals that provided both nutrition and genuine flavor. The broth becomes rich and complex. The meat becomes tender enough to cut with a fork, and the vegetables contribute both texture and taste rather than just filling space. This represents everything right about traditional cooking. Understanding that proper technique can make inexpensive ingredients taste expensive. Beef stew proves Grandma's best cooking wasn't about fancy ingredients. It was about understanding how heat, time, and technique could create meals that people actually wanted to eat. Southern and Midwest kitchens figured out that meat drippings plus flour plus milk equals breakfast magic, And biscuits and gravy became the ultimate expression of making something delicious from simple ingredients. Cook breakfast sausage until the fat renders, add flour to create a roux, then gradually add milk while whisking until you've got creamy gravy seasoned with black pepper that coats fluffy buttermilk biscuits. This emerged from resourcefulness that actually created better food rather than just cheaper food, using every part of the animal, including the fat drippings left after cooking sausage. When meat was scarce, black pepper and flour made up the difference of creating dishes that satisfied, without requiring expensive ingredients. The technique is fundamentally sound. Fat provides flavor, flour provides thickening, milk provides creaminess, and black pepper provides heat that cuts through the richness. The biscuits provide a vehicle for the gravy, while contributing their own buttery, fluffy goodness to the experience. Now that meat is more available, the dish has become even better while maintaining its fundamental appeal to working-class budgets. The combination works because each component enhances the others rather than just coexisting on the same plate. Biscuits and gravy remains on diner menus nationwide because it delivers genuine comfort food that actually deserves the name. Proof that some traditional recipes earned their popularity through quality rather than just necessity. European peasant cooking understood how to combine carbohydrates, dairy, and fat into maximum satisfaction, and Grandma's homemade mac and cheese represented this tradition at its finest. Real butter and flour create a roux. Milk gets added gradually to make bechamel. Sharp cheddar melts into the sauce, then everything gets tossed with pasta and topped with buttered breadcrumbs before baking until golden. The technique transforms three basic ingredients into comfort food that actually justifies its reputation. This is proper cooking applied to simple ingredients, creating results that bear no resemblance to the boxed alternatives that came later, and convinced people that orange powder qualified as cheese. This became a family favorite because it satisfied both physically and emotionally through proper execution of traditional techniques. The difference between homemade and boxed is the difference between food and food product. Real butter, real flour, real milk, and real cheese create flavors and textures that chemicals can't replicate. The creamy sauce coats each piece of pasta properly while maintaining a distinct cheese flavor that doesn't taste like sadness or chemicals. The breadcrumb topping provides textural contrast and buttery crunch that makes every bite interesting instead of uniform. Homemade mac and cheese costs more now because quality cheese isn't cheap, but the results justify the investment, proving that some comfort foods earn their status through actual comfort rather than just childhood nostalgia. Post-World War II convenience culture gave us Campbell's condensed tomato soup, but the pairing with grilled cheese succeeded because it represents perfect flavor balance rather than just convenient preparation. Butter gets spread on the outside of white bread, American cheese goes in the middle, and everything cooks in a hot pan until the outside is golden crispy and the inside cheese is perfectly melted. The soup gets prepared according to the can. 1 can of condensed soup plus 1 can of milk, heated until steaming. Individually, both components are mediocre. The soup is too sweet and processed. The sandwich is simple and one-note. But together, something magical happens. The grilled cheese cuts the soup's excessive sweetness with salt and fat, while providing textural contrast to the soup's smoothness. The soup provides moisture and warmth that complements the rich, crispy sandwich, creating a combination that's genuinely satisfying. You dip the sandwich in the soup, and suddenly both components become greater than they were separately. The technique matters here. The grilled cheese must be properly buttered and cooked until golden, while the cheese inside melts just right. The soup serves as both complement and vehicle, making the meal feel complete rather than just convenient. This pairing proves that convenience doesn't automatically mean compromise, when the combination creates balance that neither component achieves alone. Comfort food that works at 2 a.m. or any other time hunger strikes. Italian immigrants brought lasagna to America in the late 1800s, but it was grandmas across the country who transformed it from a regional Italian dish into the ultimate Sunday dinner that required all morning to assemble and filled the house with the kind of smells that made you cancel plans. Layers of pasta, ricotta mixture, meat sauce, and mozzarella get stacked in a deep pan and baked until bubbling. This was special occasion cooking that proved Grandma actually knew what she was doing when she had time. The technique separated good cooks from great ones. Brown Italian sausage and ground beef with onions and garlic. Simmer it in tomato sauce for at least an hour, then start the assembly. Ricotta gets mixed with eggs, parmesan, and fresh parsley. Then you layer cooked lasagna noodles with the cheese mixture, meat sauce, and shredded mozzarella until you run out of pan or ingredients. This became the centerpiece of family gatherings because it fed a crowd, tasted incredible, and improved overnight as the flavors married together in the refrigerator. The next day's reheated slice was somehow even better than fresh out of the oven, with the cheese fully set and the flavors unified into something greater than the sum of its parts. The effort was substantial, but the results justified every minute. Tender pasta layers, creamy ricotta that stayed distinct instead of turning watery, meat sauce with actual depth of flavor from proper browning and simmering, and cheese that formed those crispy edges everyone fought over. This wasn't survival food or convenience cooking. This was Grandma showing off. Lasagna proved that when Grandma had the time and ingredients, she could create legitimate cuisine that deserved every bit of praise it received. No nostalgia required to make it taste good. Grandma's kitchen wasn't a temple of culinary perfection. It was a laboratory of survival where some experiments succeeded brilliantly while others should have been buried with rationing cards. The best dishes earned their place through genuine quality that transcends nostalgia, while the worst survived only because we've confused familiarity with excellence. Hit subscribe for more culinary truth, and drop a comment about which grandma dish you're most embarrassed to have defended. Until next time, keep cooking smart and keep honoring the recipes that actually deserve the honor.